Hey, what's going on? This is the OG Kickoff. Subscribe to the OG Kickoff on YouTube. I'm Connor O'Gara. Will, we've got ourselves some music, some new music. This is a new show, but kind of the same show. I've had a tough time talking to people this week and explaining, oh yeah, it's the same show as what we were doing before, but it's different. And go subscribe to the OG Kickoff on YouTube and go, be able to subscribe on Instagram and all these different places. But it's new, but kind of the same. I'm digging the new music. I listened to it today. I think people hopefully will be fully on board with this.
See, I'm on a whole new vibe, man. I got to have, the perfect business meeting with you the other day at Tibby's. They were giving me free hurricane shots. I had a couple of those. There was some chicken and waffles. There was some beignets. Got to kill those. And then before this, man, we're recording at 8:30 Eastern. I've told you this is like my noon. I hit a couple of bench PRs. You know what I'm saying? So I'm really in the zone. This feels like a whole different world to me.
The amount of my mom always calls them endomorphins, even though they're called endorphins. The amount of endorphins that you have going right now through the roof. The amount of endorphins I have going doing this show through the roof as well. I woke up today and I said to myself, well, I get to do a podcast today and I get to do it with you. And I am very excited to be doing just that. So it's good to be back. We have a great pod today. No interview today because we have a million things to get to. This is the first real episode of the OG Kickoff. Last episode, if you're kind of looking at this, like maybe you didn't see our last episode, you're just seeing this in your feed, you're like, oh, that's a new logo. What in the world's going on here? That is our introduction to you, the people that we've been speaking to for hopefully several years. But if you're new, we are doing this version of the show, the OG Kickoff. It is no longer the Saturday Down South podcast. And we're doing it in a way that we've kind of always done it, but with some tweaks. And like I said, you will pick up on some of those tweaks, some of which being new social channels. We have a new email address, theogkickoff@gmail.com. So if you want to go send us emails about random stuff, I'll get something that I want real legitimate emails for later in the show, but please send us emails there. We already got a ton of emails that came in after our first episode with people that are like so fired up, love to see what you guys are doing, and I'm here for that. So Will, this is we said this like 3 different times, so this joke is kind of old. This is the OG kickoff.
Yes, exactly. And, I didn't really go behind the scenes and get like consent from people to read their emails online. So I want to put people on the spot, but some super nice emails coming through. Had someone said they like my laugh, which my mom doesn't even like my laugh. So thank you. Had some people saying, hey, Will's not an LSU homer. Appreciate that. Nothing. I don't think Connor ever got negative comments. No, just kidding. But like, it's really nice to see, people talk about getting their flowers and stuff. And it's been really cool, the amount of support that we've had, through the email, through the Instagram, through the Facebook group. It's just basically been encouraging us like, yeah, guys, keep going. We're really, picking up what you're putting down out there.
I did not have a negative comment in the emails. And again, thank you so much for everybody that reached out. Like the amount of support over the course of the last few weeks has been just anything beyond anything that I could have ever imagined. And I am so unbelievably grateful for it. I did, however, have a woman that came up to me at the beach the other day. We were at New Smyrna Beach. Shout out New Smyrna Beach. The real ones know in Orlando, that's the beach that you go to. And we were in the parking lot just leaving, had a lovely beach day. Lauren's mom was in town. And a woman, probably like, I guess she was in her 70s, probably early 70s, 2 women came up and they were trying to figure out parking because parking situation there, you have to like do it online now. You get barcode stuff, you get it. And she like came up to us and she was like, hey, people of your generation, surely you know how to do this. And that was the exact type of thing that Lauren figured out in roughly 7 seconds. But the first thing she said to me, oh, you're a ginger. And I was like, nice to meet you too. So while I did not get negative comments in emails, I've been thinking about that one for a little bit because, man, it was like, boom. And I don't consider myself a ginger because if I shave my beard, I'm not a ginger. But I didn't know what to do. I was flummoxed, Will. Absolutely flummoxed.
What an insane thing to say to someone, number one. And number two, someone who you're asking for help from. Number three, someone at the beach. Like,
Yeah.
my boy's out here struggling. The son has his biggest op. And you're going to sit here and bring it up right in front of his face? Like, come on, man.
Like, I even did a decent job with the sunscreen on Friday, and still this woman, oh, you're a ginger. And if she had been a redhead or something like that, and no, she's gray, she's in her 70s. Okay, that's one thing. She's trying to bond. She's trying to strike up a conversation, but she said this as if it was like, oh my gosh, you poor thing. And I'm thinking to myself, Lauren, do we want to help these people? Very nice people. They're from Mondora. Um, man, it threw me for a loop. So my week finished on a very different note than what
I thought
those
the
emails
payoff
were.
to the story was going to be she had listened to the podcast and she was
No.
excited to hear us back. But that reminds me of the great quote from Bomani Jones, where he's like, "Look, all y'all, dudes that are hitting me up and everything, I'm famous to you, but I'm the funniest kind of famous," which is from dudes like age 25 to 45. I feel like we're right in there. So when you told me it was an older woman, I should have known right there. She's not locked into the over unders, don't want to stereotype or anything, but that type of person on the beach has business to attend, and they have. I mean, do you consider that a slur?
Um, it's not a slur. It's not. Let's not pretend like we don't want to go down that road. All right, there are worse things that you can say to someone. I don't want to lump it in there, but it's a jab. It's definitely not said as, oh my gosh, like that's amazing, that's unbelievable, especially when you can gauge my reaction initially, and I'm like, I wasn't leaning into the bit, needless to say, but yeah, the plan for today, we are doing since we've been gone. We've done this before. We're doing it again. It's a different set of circumstances with this since we've been gone. This time, shout out Kelly Clarkson, by the way. Kind of an early 2000s pop version of How Do You Like Me Now? You know?
That's
Okay.
a really good point. Yeah.
Yeah, let's just say we're so moving on. And thanks to you, now we get what we want. So we're not moving on to spring ball. Another thing that is so back until we look back on basically everything that's happened in February, because that's kind of been the time that we've been gone. A semi-eventful few weeks it's been in college football, but a lot of things that have happened that have been like, man, I wish we had a pod that we were doing today that we could react to. So this is kind of our place to do this. I realize some of these things are old news. We are getting to them and hopefully providing some perspective that's going to shape what you've been talking about over the course of the last few weeks. So let's do it. We've got like 6 or 7 things that I want to discuss today, and we're just going to rip through some of these. Okay. Joey Aguilar, not sure if you heard, not playing at Tennessee in 2026 unless it's with the Titans. So maybe, I don't know, backup Cam Ward. I could see him doing something like that. They're both Joey Aguilar, I think, is older than Cam Ward. Yeah, he's older.
Which is impressive because Cam Ward's decently old for a first overall pick.
Yeah, that's true. Joey Aguilar is going to be 25. He's going to be 25 by the time the NFL season starts. So he's got to be older than Cam Ward. I'm not sure that I felt strongly either way about the way that this case was unfolding. And I really wasn't one of those people saying, oh my gosh, he must play. And at the same time, I wasn't sitting there going, banish him. This is going to ruin the sport. But I did feel a few things watching everything play out with Joey Aguilar, which ultimately ended with him, not getting this injunction that would have allowed for him to be able to play. This did always feel weird that someone who started playing football at the college level in 2019 was trying to get a year of eligibility to play in 2026. That just feels objectively like a long time. 2019 to 2026. That is forever. And if you don't think that's the case, when he began his college career, 15 of 16 SEC teams had different head coaches, including Jeremy Pruitt at Tennessee. Think about that. That's wild.
Man, yeah, like remember whenever people talked about the transfer portal and how unfair it was pre-opening the transfer portal, when they were like, well, this tight end, he has like a family member who's really like sick and he just wants them to watch his games. And now it's like we have a dude who's old enough to rent a car, who is older than like the average NFL running back. And I don't feel sorry for any of these guys the way I don't feel sorry for like the 3 and 4 loss teams trying to get in the playoff.
Is it still 25 to run a car?
It's not, but you get a better rate. I saw this the other day.
Because I've always been like, oh yeah, when I turn 25, this will be the last thing that I'm now allowed to do. And then I remember hearing, oh no, you could have been doing this for a little while. I think I even rented a car at 23 or 24 at one point. I'm pretty sure, yeah, we rented a car out of state 23, actually in Florida, but that doesn't mean anything because you can kind of do anything in Florida. So maybe that's always been the case. Maybe it's not. But yeah, this whole situation, it felt like what are we really trying to do And I get that Joey Aguilar wasn't playing college football at Tennessee in 2019. Okay. Like he wasn't even playing FBS football until 2023, starts his FBS career at App State. And then, the rest. He didn't get the Diego Pavia benefit of, hey, these JUCO years aren't counting against you because of how long ago his college career started. That's been a big point of contention, the timeline. That's been the whole thing with the NCAA. Are they going to do this 5-5 thing? Or I don't know. But this always kind of felt like part heat check for Tennessee against the NCAA and part desperation for Josh Heupel. You can't tell us if we broke any rules argument that Tennessee made against the NCAA over the Nico Iamaleava case was a significant domino at that time when all of that happened. That was the type of thing that you're like, oh man, this is really going to open the floodgates. The NCAA is kind of powerless now in college football. And given the current landscape of the sport, like I get now why Tennessee would try and take a chance like this and say, you know what? Leave it up to a judge to kind of hopefully decide, and maybe it's going to work in our favor. And there's the obvious thing of having a 25-year-old returning starting quarterback beats having what Tennessee now will look to, which is 19-year-old George McIntyre and his 9 career pass attempts against FBS competition, none of which happen against power conference competition. And then Faze and Brandon, who won't even turn 18 years old until June. And I need to do better about pronouncing his name better. I think it's pronounced Faison. And we're going to hear a couple different pronunciations of that. When he turns 18, I promise I'll get it right. All right. That sounds wrong out of context. You've also got Ryan Staub, the Colorado transfer. Talked about him with Trey Wallace on the last iteration of the Saturday Down South podcast when he was on like a month ago. And who knows, like maybe he's going to shake loose and be the guy after it didn't work out at Colorado. Lord knows we've seen in the transfer portal era, just because you're second or third string at one power conference program doesn't mean that's just going to be your life forever. So I'm
And
not
generally,
here.
things don't really work out at Colorado, I think, as a rule.
We're what? It's February, so we're 14 months removed from them having a 9-win season with the Heisman Trophy winner. It's not all bad, like life could be a whole lot worse.
Worked out
But
for two guys. Very good. Very much worked out for two guys over there.
it's worked out for Jordan Tyson, but he had to leave Colorado to be able to make that happen. Jordan Seaton had to leave Colorado, go to LSU and get a whole lot of money to do that. But you're right, you're fairly right. But yeah, so as of this recording, assuming that nothing changes with the Joey Aguilar case and there's not some way in which he can still end up playing college football at Tennessee in 2026, 6 years that we're now looking back on with Josh Heupel, this will be year 6 for him. He has yet to start a season with the same QB1 in consecutive years. Okay. That's a weird thing to process because he's had some old guys, and Hendon Hooker basically was a returning starter. But, go back and look. QB1 in week 1. That's what we're talking about. Joe Milton was his first QB1 in 2021. Hendon Hooker 2022. Milton in 2023. Nico in 2024. Aguilar 2025. And who the heck knows who that's going to be in 2026. Nico is the only young pup in that group. Those are all old guys. Like those are all guys that had kind of seen some things at the college level. And I think while we tend to think the Josh Heupel offense lends itself to the younger quarterback, it's quarterback friendly, he likes older dudes at quarterback. He just kind of does. And Nico ended up being a guy who felt pretty limited schematically, something that we talked about ad nauseum. And we talked about how it didn't really feel like Josh Heupel was ready to take off the training wheels. Ask Nico's dad. That was Heupel's fault. Ask Josh Heupel, and he'll tell you that Nico wasn't ready. Make of it what you will. The result was what happened. And you could say, well, Josh Heupel is now tasked with finally developing a quarterback, and it's going to determine his future. Or he'll find a way to go 8-4 with this team, and he'll have 2 new quarterbacks in that room at this time next year, and he'll kind of maybe be in murky standing, and nobody will really change how they feel about him. That's possible too. That's definitely possible. But just remember that whenever we talk about Josh Heupel, and this is something that I probably needed to do a better job of discussing with Trey when we had him on, his contract has been made more favorable 4 times. 4 times from Danny White. Danny White has gone to the negotiating table 4 different times and either given him a raise or some sort of extension, or given him more private jet time. That's literally something that happened. And he said, you're going to have more private jet time. That was the post-playoff deal that he got. Was,
You're gonna
hey,
have a little private jet as a treat. I wish that was part of one of my contracts. Like for 5 minutes of private jet time, and I'm over the moon.
Give me 5 hours. I want a successful takeoff and landing. I think you get 5 hours with a private jet. Where are you going?
I might just go around in circles, man. I was just thinking about that. Like, just take some go live up there to do a Q&A, little glass of champagne. Yeah, I think private jet time's a great perk.
Yeah. Oh, and like tripling it or whatever he ended up doing. So, look, I bring that up because we can talk about the quarterback situation. We can talk about how desperate he is, and if they don't get this right this year, then it could be curtains for Josh Heupel. Like, yeah, that's all possible. But he has a boss that has given him the benefit of the doubt a lot and has really acknowledged where Tennessee was with Jeremy Pruitt and where they're going to, or where they've been with Josh Heupel. And when you have a boss that is acknowledging your success repeatedly, that matters. Josh Heupel is not in the same situation that Shane Beamer or Brent Venables are in, where they have different bosses than the ones who hired them. And if you don't believe me on that one, trust me, that matters. Okay. There is an ideal world for Tennessee amidst all of this, amidst this Joey Aguilar thing not going their way, amidst them whiffing on Sam Levitt in the portal, whiffing on Ty Simpson in the portal, having these things come out publicly and kind of look bad against them. In an ideal world, I think Tennessee gets a more developed than we think version of George McIntyre and a earlier than expected show of competence from Faison Brandon, where it's not quite the DJ Lagway thing of a couple of years ago, but it's, not only does he kind of like look good in garbage time, but maybe he had to get a start or two because of an injury to McIntyre and he actually looked the part, and all of a sudden Tennessee fans are clamoring for him to be the full-time guy. Like, that to me is this thing actually going all right. And if all of a sudden Josh Heupel doesn't lose crowds at the end of season and it's still, sellouts at Neyland and stuff like that, then this will have been a non-failure. I don't know that happens. There's also a world in which, look, this is someone who could have a 6-6 team all of a sudden. It could be a floor year, which we thought maybe last year would be. They end up still winning 8 games, albeit it was a hollow 8 wins with no wins against FBS teams with a winning record. And all of a sudden you're talking about that buyout. It's 75% of the remaining contract, which I believe is $27 million was what it breaks down to, considering he's got $36 million left after this year. So paying him $27 million to go away when we know the Jeremy Pruitt thing, very well documented. I'm just going to say it's not imminent, but never rule it out. Empty stadiums, empty SEC stadiums, they kind of matter, okay? They mean a whole lot. And if that's the optics, then obviously we'll look back on this ruling and say that was pretty pivotal. So that's kind of where I think this Aguilar thing has my mind going, is that there are still a lot of different outcomes on the table, even though this quarterback situation is definitely not ideal.
So I'll start off here, Connor. I spent a little bit of that trying to find the funniest athlete that is younger than Joey Aguilar. And guess what I came up with? Caitlin Clark.
Yeah, I believe that. That makes a lot of sense. He started his college career in 2019. That's a long time ago.
I mean, and again, she's been famous since she was like basically a recruit. So it does kind of even out. But, a 4-year college player that's not well into her WNBA career. It's just, again, not a lot of sympathy there. Now, I will say this. I think at Tennessee, they pride themselves in they're going to that stadium. Now, they might throw golf balls at you to preview something we got coming up a little bit later. But they'll be there. They'll just be booing. And Tennessee fans might be the ones who are kind of tearing me apart for saying this after last season. But remember, guys, we were asking, in the preseason, 6-7 wins, like, would that be fireable for Josh Heupel? And Tennessee fans were like, yeah, we wouldn't be mad. And then guess what? They got to the end of the year. They got more wins than that. And lo and behold, what were they? Connor? Mad. And so I think sometimes when you see, the offense in non-conference, and I think that's a testament to Josh Heupel's offense, that you can see how high it is against the Syracuse or in some of these kind of like, you could say meaningless, but the cupcakes to start the year. Then you get an SEC play and you start to slide. I would kind of make the other argument. I'm curious to your perspective on this. Josh Heupel is a top blank adaptable SEC coach, would you say?
In terms of percentile?
Like top 2, top 3, top 5 of the overall conference.
Adaptable, he's definitely been adaptable. I think he's probably top 5 in that. I definitely wouldn't say top 3 at this point, given if you're really good at adapting, you're really good on the road. Josh Heupel has not been really good on the road. It's been an issue. And after last year against quality competition, seeing the way that it played out, it was again an issue. It could be an issue this year too. But I think that one of the things that needs to be remembered with this situation is that yes, you're looking at a very uncertain quarterback situation. There are a lot of times in which Josh Heupel has kind of been able to just overcome that and shake that off, and it's been no big deal. Maybe the Jim Knowles defense, with the addition of multiple guys coming over from Penn State, maybe that's going to help. And maybe a lower perspective is actually going to work in his favor. But I will say this, and this is going to sound like I promise, I need to get out ahead of this. I am not criticizing Tennessee fans. I am not at all. You are loud. Okay. I have heard from so many Tennessee fans over the decade plus of covering this conference. And what I think gets forgotten. So from 2017, which is Butch Jones' disastrous year, doesn't win an SEC game. The Georgia game, they sold that out. I think they lost 40-0, something like that. They did not have another home sellout until the game that we will be doing for It Just Meant More later in the week, 2021, Ole Miss, Tennessee. They went like a presidential term in between sellouts at Neyland. Again, it is not a fair weather fan base by any stretch of the imagination. Selling out to watch Jeremy Pruitt or watch late dead and buried Butch Jones. Look, I'm not going to fault you for that one. Tickets are expensive. I'm not going to say that's a bad fan base, but it is a reminder that things can go sour and you do have a place that you can go that is down. It is not guaranteed that you will all of a sudden have the best optics no matter what. And sometimes optics can dictate these things. And if it looks like a mess from the jump, and if there's no answer whatsoever, it'll prove costly. It just will.
Yeah, and I'm right there with you. Like I'm really, if I'm speaking to Tennessee fans, I'm saying there's a lot to be happy about. I'm looking at the brighter side here, so I'm certainly not criticizing. But when Tennessee does kind of what they did and expands their stadium without expanding their stadium. If you catch my drift, like usually when we get these stadium renovations, they're massive, costly projects. When they did that stadium, like the big expansion that got them into this massive number, they didn't really update their stadium. And so that puts you in kind of a weird situation where your stadium experience is awesome to create the Roman Coliseum in a big game, but it's not awesome to just pack out the stadium for like a random game. And so I'll say it like that. Like if their number wasn't so high, if it was even like the size of like, I don't know.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, like Auburn Stadium or like I think they have an extra couple of seats that are pretty hard to sit in. I'll put it to you like that. So, but I think their attendance is still pretty good. But the reason why I bring up the point about adaptability is I think Josh Heupel's had 1 year where he felt awesome about his quarterback, and that was the Nico year, and it was maybe his worst year of quarterback play.
Nah, he felt good 2022. He felt good about that team going into that year with
Him
coming back.
Hooker,
yeah, with Hooker coming back in 2022. They're now did he? I think that team even surprised him a little bit with just how good they were. But they had really built up a lot of offensive momentum, and then some of their early season games, the game at LSU, I think all of a sudden was like, all right, I feel really good about this team.
Yeah, and it's funny too that you bring up Milton started the year before in 2021, and then they kind of had like the entire Hendon Hooker experience. Then he comes back. But the reason I say that is, coming into this year, again, the expectations were pretty low, and the defense just completely fell apart in a way that, you lose these great corners. You have what I still think is a pretty good DC. You can kind of see that by how he's been regarded since then. And so I think that he's kind of proven that coming from this, the UCF guy that was like, the 7-second Suns, that they couldn't run the ball, they couldn't be physical. How is this going to work in the SEC? They immediately dispelled that. And when they have had a limited quarterback, I think that's when they've really been more physical, been able to run the ball, commit to those identities. So I wouldn't be worried if I'm a Tennessee fan. I think Josh Heupel is maybe even a little bit more recession-proof than Tennessee fans do. But as I often say, as a fan of a SEC team, won't say rival, but in the same kind of tier, please bail out on Josh Heupel. I want Butch Jones back.
That's not happening. I'm looking forward to some traditional quarterback battles in the SEC. Kind of was ready to call the traditional quarterback battle dead And we have some. We have one in Alabama as well, and it's going to be strange to be able to see some of these big programs that are like, wait a minute, we really need to figure out what our quarterback situation looks like, and we're going to do it the old-fashioned way. A place that does not have a quarterback battle, unfortunately for Deuce Knight, is Ole Miss, because Trinidad Chambliss is playing college football in 2026, and he's doing so at Ole Miss, unless we get some sort of crazy ruling that the appeal is being heard and being processed, which it doesn't look like that's going to happen in time for the start of the season. But this was a different case than the Joey Aguilar eligibility case, but similar in that local courts were making a big ruling on a guy getting to stay in college. And it's weird because I was thinking about this earlier today. At the start of the 21st century, all we were talking about was the limiting factors with guys trying to get to the NFL. And Maurice Claret had a very drawn out process with becoming eligible after his suspension to declare for the NFL draft. And it was all this debate, this back and forth about like underclassmen and whatnot. And now we're sitting here like, hey, let's get these guys in their early to mid 20s, an extra year of eligibility. Let's take it to local court and let's go through. Like, it is totally flipped. And I'm not going to, spend 90 minutes to break down this case like the judge did when he read his ruling, and NCAA lawyers literally walked out in the middle of this hearing.
And they're well versed in BS. So making those guys walk out is really impressive.
That's hard to do. I mean, they probably had to go to the bathroom, something like that. And they're just like, yeah, whatever. We know how this is going to go. I will just say a medical redshirt at a Division II school was the difference ultimately in this case. It probably won't open up the floodgates because of how one-of-one Chambliss's situation, his career arc was. It's because of that unique career arc that it seemed like Chambliss wanted to stay in school and not go to the NFL as possibly the second or third quarterback off the board. A couple of things. The more I thought about it, the more I wondered what Chambliss was communicating to the outside world by going to such lengths to stay at Ole Miss. If he thought he was ready for the speed of the NFL, I think he's gone. I think so much of this is about what's in the back of his mind, because we can get into the dollars and cents of all of it. And like, obviously he's going to be taken care of at Ole Miss. All signs pointed to him being taken care of pretty well in the NFL. And we can him and haw about the late first round versus early second round and the difference in financial compensation. I get all that. Let's not pretend like any of us have a true crystal ball and we could actually predict where those guys are going to be coming off the board. Okay. We can have a rough idea, but I don't think we can say with, total certainty that it would have been this dollar amount versus that dollar amount. I think that this, instead of being just about money, I think this was about a guy who watched a lot of things happen in a really short period of time. In 7 months, he went from thinking he was playing Division II football to being in an AT&T commercial for a playoff-bound team that would ultimately fall 20 seconds short of playing for a national title. That doesn't happen. And I know we talked a lot about Chambliss because it's just not the way that this has worked in the SEC. And I think that there is a part of him that is just trying to be present and trying to appreciate this opportunity and thinks he can still get better. Even if all of us are able to look at him and go, dude, you handled pressure really, really well. Everybody saw all those pressures that Miami was getting on you, and you were still getting rid of the football. It didn't matter that Kewan Lacey was down. You were still like new play caller. You don't have Lane Kiffin to be able to turn to. Not new play caller. Don't get upset, Ole Miss or LSU fans. I know Charlie Weiss Jr. was still there, but different situation with people that you can communicate to. And you're just like, oh yeah, I'm going to be the same, maybe even better version of myself. And he was awesome. And maybe there's a part of him that's like, you know what? Yeah, I was good, but I don't have the full confidence yet that I can lead an NFL franchise, because if you get drafted in round 1, that's what you're doing. You're doing that unless you are drafted in a situation where you're behind, MVP level Aaron Rodgers, or you get hurt like JJ McCarthy did. You are playing football as a round 1 quarterback from the jump. Go ask Jackson Dart last year. Like, you're getting into these games. Chambliss returning to college football is good for college football, and obviously it's good for Ole Miss. I think he makes them a preseason top 5 team. And LSU fans, you let me know. You disagree with me. That's perfectly fine. I don't say that to discredit the impact that Lane Kiffin and Charlie Weiss Jr. had on him in that offense, okay? One of those guys was in his ear throughout the entire playoff. I'm not pretending that that's just nothing. But John David Baker spent 3 seasons at Ole Miss on Lane's staff. Then he went off to East Carolina, did his own thing, led a top 25 offense, was able to be on the sideline, was able to watch every single rep that Trinidad Chambliss was taking during that playoff run. They're not exactly reinventing the wheel with the offense that they're going to run. It's not like he's starting over from scratch. Yes, he's probably going to have to learn a few new things, but this is the best returning quarterback in college football. That's right. I would take him over Dante Moore. I really would. I would take him over Arch Manning. Okay, I would. I would take him over Julian Sayin. I think he did more with less than Julian Sayin did. I think he is the best returning quarterback in college football, and getting to stay in that system just with a new person in his ear is still highly beneficial. Add in the fact that Pete Golding's defense should improve, even though, yes, they had some big significant losses in the portal. Uman Miel and Daughtery, those guys going to LSU, that is a bummer for a defense that I would have been looking at going like, I think that's going to be a top 20 defense in 2026. I would probably say that's not going to be the case. They didn't need a top 20 defense to go as far as they did this past year. So who knows what that means. But yes, I would put them in the preseason top 5. I would bump out Texas. I had IU at 4. I would put Georgia at 3, Ohio State at 2, Oregon at 1.
This might be just the most naive take I've ever given in front of you, and fully just hit me with like a,
God,
okay, let's get you to bed, Grandpa. But like, him staying doesn't really make any sense almost at all. If you really think about this year's QB class versus next year's QB class, you just hit on some of those guys. Like, you want to be compared to, like, Mendoza's, okay, he's himself. He's number 1. You weren't in the conversation for that. I don't want to break any news. Next year, you have so many guys that you're competing against, where it's like, who's the second best quarterback in this class?
I get that. Mm-hmm. We think about that way more than those guys do. Way more. Mm-hmm. They're not in the business of comparing themselves constantly to these other guys. And I really don't think that they are as focused on like, oh, this year's QB class versus next QB class as we are, because that's never determined their success. And it's probably not going to determine their future success. It might determine what situation they end up in, but it really doesn't have as big of an impact. And so I think he's looking internally. I really do. I think there is an element of him. If you have any ounce of doubt in your mind that you can hang in the pocket and you could look pre-snap at Myles Garrett and go, I'm going to have to figure out a plan to be able to get rid of the football so that guy doesn't take my head off and put me as one of his gravestones in his front yard. I'm going to have to figure that out. If there's any piece of you that has doubt, you're not ready. And if he still has even the tiniest sliver of doubt and that he feels like he has more to do to be able to improve at the college level, then that's why he's staying. I don't think he's looking as much at the quarterback situation, even if you're absolutely right. And even if you look at this year's class and we have these conversations next year and we're like, man, if Chambliss had just come out in 2025 or like post 2025, how much more money would he have made? You can be 100% right. But if it's still like that in his mind, then he's like, that's the only thing I need to listen to.
So hold on. I haven't said anything stupid just yet because I'm getting there. So I think there is a bit of kind of like old school altruism here, right? Like if you look at, okay, Bryce Young, Will Anderson in Alabama, you say Alabama is this great program. They want to come back. They want to finish what they started. If you look at, up and down the country, Dante Moore coming back. Oh my God, what a great program. Like, what have they done? I kind of think you need to like kind of have the same take on Ole Miss is where I'm going here, is that Ole Miss provided a pathway to him for him to look in the mirror, because the premise of the question, right, is him doing something that is not common. Him, to your point, looking in the mirror, which athletes are famously not great at doing, of really seeing themselves objectively. And I think that one thing that athletes are very scared of in every sense of the word, and you look at the, kind of the paranoia, the different things guys do to stay healthy, is injuries, right? And while you could look at the door slamming shut on, okay, the Tim Tebow class that came back, what ended that? Sam Bradford being the presumptive number 1 overall pick, destroying his leg, having an NFL career that probably didn't go the way that we thought it would because of that. I think that's where you really saw the end of a lot of that generation of quarterbacks coming back. And so I think that given what recent quarterbacks have seen, Lenore Sellers, Garrett Nussmeier, where you've seen their draft stocks fall, I think that athletes are able sometimes to worry about injury, worry about factors they can't control, just like what happened to those guys. Like if you talk to Sellers, if you talk to Nussmeier, they wouldn't go, oh, like I'm a different player this year. they would talk about the circumstances around themselves. And I think that athletes are aware of that stuff. And you can see it with the portal. So I say all that to be positive and say, I think that the culture stuff, to a degree, is a little bit real at Ole Miss. I think this is something that was completely inconceivable for Ole Miss even a couple of years ago. And I think if you're an Ole Miss fan, you have to feel awesome about it, that I don't feel like your guy ever wavered. And we could talk about him. We could talk about Lacey. We could talk about in terms of, okay, Lane Kiffin's going to come take all your players, big bad LSU. I don't think that was ever really that far down the road with these guys. And I think that says a lot about the culture there. I think it's a really big positive.
And for what it's worth, it's not just Chambliss that makes him preseason top 5, although he's what puts it over the edge. It is Lacey. It's returning a lot of key pieces on that offensive line. Yeah, they've got like a really new receiver room. They've kind of always had a really new receiver room, a lot of turnover in those spots. But that system usually, and again, it's a similar system, albeit with different people scouting that talent. But it's still going to be pretty receiver friendly with the guys that they can plug in there. And I like some of the pieces that they return, especially in the defensive line. You get Suntaran Perkins still back. You're able to get Will Eccles is coming back. You made some nice additions on the defensive side in the portal. They went and stole Clemson's star linebacker who was supposed to come in from Cal and got Dabo all up in arms. Like they did some really nice things that make me go, well, yeah, that team was 20 seconds away from playing in a national championship with that quarterback. Yes, different coaching staff, but I do think that we're talking about so people are. I had a couple of people that are like, oh wait, so if so it doesn't mean anything that Lane is just off at a different job. Would Ole Miss be preseason number 1 if Lane was coming back? Maybe, maybe. Like I'm not necessarily opposed to that, and I do love Oregon, and it's a lot more than just Dante Moore with what they're returning, especially on the defensive side of the ball. But we don't need to get into that. So I do think Trinidad Chambliss returning. It is huge news. Obviously, many people have already dissected it. Also huge news. Will Georgia? How can we say this without repeating ourselves?
Hold on, was that take dumb?
No, it wasn't. It's not dumb because
it's a little bit of a boomer take. It's a little bit of he really just likes the college experience. But I think that's a little bit of the case here. And I give you, Caden Lee was in the same situation. I think that when you really look at it and go, hey, this could be one of the more puzzling decisions to stay if it doesn't work out because you have a new head coach, you have a new play caller, you're losing Caden Lee. You're really putting your faith in Ole Miss. So I think there is something really special about him staying that needs to be commended.
Caden Lee, Austin Simmons, very tight. Those guys, one of the same in theory. He's going to be catching passes from Austin Simmons at Mizzou. Another nice benefit there as well. But yeah, I look forward to watching Trinidad Chambliss play football in 2026. Best quarterback returning in college football for my money. Gunnar Stockton also part of those conversations as well. Didn't want to. Georgia fans, don't get upset. Georgia fans, you will get upset with what I'm going to say because two more guys got arrested for a driving related offense. Chris Cole. I'm going to totally butcher the last name. Chris Cole's a really good player, but the pronunciation of Darren Ikanagban, I'm going to say that's all right. Darren, DI. We call him DI. I won't tell you what you don't already know. It's an issue. You don't need me to tell you that. If this had started before the national championship stuff, it would probably still be considered an issue. But the fact that it happened literally after this tragedy when Georgia repeated, it's a more well-documented issue. And it's more of an issue that even when Kirby comes down hard on some of these guys and kicks them off the team, it still keeps happening. If this happens at Baylor, yes, nobody cares. This is not Baylor. This is not that situation. We have full context. Instead, it happens with a potential all SEC guy and Chris Cole, a guy that really showed a lot as an underclassman last year. And you now look at the total and you go, oh, that's more than 20 players and coaches at Georgia who have been arrested or cited for traffic-related offenses in these 3 years that it's been since that tragedy took place.
When you get into the players and coaches, I think it's when you really have a structural problem. It's one thing to be like, the PD is a little bit hard on our players, but you have staff members at the University of Georgia that have had to pass background checks. I think that's a little different.
That's not ideal. Not ideal. And again, it shouldn't necessarily matter if it's guys that aren't going to see the field, but it does put a little bit more of a spotlight on Georgia when it happens to guys that I think will become household names in the sport. And I don't think it's necessarily going to make or break Georgia's pursuit of a national championship, ultimately becoming the team of the 2020s, which I've said before and I've said again, is on the table. If you win 3 titles in a decade, you get to be considered the team of the decade. That's usually the way that works. And look, I don't think that Chris Cole is all of a sudden like going to get kicked off the team or anything like that. And everybody will look at that and say, well, Kirby is, he's soft and he needs to punish these guys harder and zero tolerance policy with all this stuff. And it's like, well, you're going to get rid of an all SEC guy who had to pay what, like $36 in bail. Again, I'm not trying to minimize what he did, but these are the things that are being discussed and why these situations are only going to make Kirby Smart look bad. It's only going to make him look bad no matter what. And we all acknowledge that this is the type of thing that shouldn't happen, but it continues to. And if Kirby never wins another title at Georgia, it will be fair to look back on his career and wonder if he was perhaps hindered at points and not able to handle the ebbs and flows of the NIL era. Because I would argue, yes, technically 2021 and 2022, the NIL era had started, different with the fluidity of the transfer portal and how open all of this stuff was. So I don't necessarily consider that the true beginning of it. And I don't think those rosters were constructed with that in mind. So to me, it's really like post Michigan. It's like Ohio State 2024 is the first real NIL transfer portal era type team with the way that roster was constructed, how they were talked about in the preseason. So look, I'm not going to sit here and pretend like, oh, this is just take away their cars and everything will be fine. Guys have had cars in the SEC for decades. All right. The Dodge Charger is the official car of the SEC. Marla used to always say, okay. Like,
and like, it hasn't gone well, just guys having cars in the SEC, but it hasn't gone this bad. So I think bad. That's like kind of my thing. And guys, I've been saying this since the first super tragic incident that happened, in concert with a national championship, which is that this is the type of stuff that when you're winning can get kind of swept under the rug, right? But then when you have the last couple of years that you have, does it change my opinion of it? No. But as the national media views it, as even probably Georgia fans are sorry, it could probably get a little bit tiring at this point. And if you make your brand off of doing things the right way, physicality, hitting guys, being on time, the things that we've heard
Clemson.
Kirby.
So did I say that out loud?
I mean, Clemson's like kind of a good example because they went to a 12 on the morality scale. And, if they have guys do the wrong thing, then it's like Dabo is like, it looks like a big hypocrite. You're making your head coach look silly when you do this stuff. And so just as whenever Nick Saban was the standard, I was talking about that it's, ridiculous that former Saban guys were getting caught for gambling or, smuggling certain illicit things or deer antler spray. Do you remember that one, Connor?
Deer antler spray. Who was the player involved in that? I do remember
the story. That was actually a rash of Bama players back in the old NCAA. I want to say this is about 2011, 2012. Guys were just randomly popped ineligible and they were taking deer antler spray. And it's like, hey, you got to know the rules. Like it was a tragic thing that happened at the time because guys just didn't play for a minute. I believe it contributed to a loss in like a bowl game or something. But that being said, so obviously it wasn't 2011. So that being said,
you said it, not me.
That being said, right? If you are going to make your brand, we just work harder here. We're just more locked in than everybody else. So you come here and you compete and nobody gets a handout. Then over the course of this massive sample size, you start to go, okay, guys, like I'm ready to hear, the Athens County or Clark County, whatever PD is extra hard on them. Okay. But now we're here. And I want to be clear for me, for Will Ogburn, the winning and losing doesn't matter. I just think for Kirby overall, it's one of those things that we look up, how many times have we done this? A coach is so safe. Oh my God, they got the world. We just mentioned it with Dabo. How could it go wrong from here? And then you look up a year or two later, it's like, this guy has all these things going wrong. Well, this is how all those things go wrong, right? Is that you could just start listing all these driving incidents and go, hey, maybe we are starting to get to a point where if I was a parent, I'd be a little bit worried about my kid going to Georgia.
Yeah, and I think there's two, like, and not to get too preachy with this, when Georgia's on-field product at times lacks discipline, then you start to kind of wonder, not, oh, was that driving arrest related to it, but is the head coach's message getting through? Is it getting through?
Is the standard the standard, or is it not? That was the Kirby quote. The standard is the standard. Well, for some players, if you're an all-SEC player, the standard's a little different, right? Yeah. The Nick Saban Michigan State story can only be told so many times without giving guys a second chance.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Gus Malzahn. He retired while we were gone. Yeah. He told DJ Lagway that he reminded him of Cam Newton, whiffed on him, and then said, "Man, I might not have it anymore. That line used to work. You know how much I used to pull at the bar when I could drop that line?" No, I'm kidding. That was mean.
Old reliable. It's true though. If you pull out the Cam Newton comp for DJ Lagway that don't get him, that's actually introspective. The most introspective we've ever seen Gus Malzahn. Maybe I should just go play golf. Go back to Orlando.
Do you think Gus has a picture of Cam in his wallet that he just busts out random points? Like he goes to banquets and stuff like that, meets with former players. Man, did you know that I coached Cam Newton and I was the one that was in his year and I was able to lead him to 2010? Like that was me. You kind of remind me a little bit. You know what? This guy brings up a story that has nothing to do with football at all. He's just talking about like paying his taxes. That reminds me of the time that Cam Newton ran right past the what was it? What was it name on the LSU game? You saw the play. Like
A weak side defensive back against a 6'5" gargantuan quarterback. Hey, what I want to see is the text message conversation between Gus Malzahn and Cam Newton, because it's Gus just being like, "Hey, Cam, saw your show today. Great stuff." And Cam just responding in hieroglyphics, "Thanks, coach." Like sounding like the Demogorgon. And they're just going back and forth. Gus, like, just very short sentences. Cam just like talking like a demon. I don't know if you guys have seen Cam's tweets, but that
Instagram,
man,
everything. He writes in hieroglyphics.
it's nuts. So I would
you can't
love to hear
follow
what
it.
their rapport is like, just communicating. Two very one-of-one individuals, I would say.
Do you think Gus probably had Cam listed as a reference for all those years? I would. I don't blame him. I would put that on there. But yeah, comparing every other quarterback you see to Cam Newton, probably not the best practice.
It's the inverse Kurt Signetti. It's Google Cam. It's not Google
Yeah.
me.
Don't Google me. Google Cam. Look, Gus did a lot more than just Cam Newton. Okay, let the record show that is not my overall takeaway from his career.
Nick Marshall, much more impressive, I think, because Cam Newton's Cam Newton. Nick Marshall's Nick Marshall.
That's a good point, Will. Better coaching job, Nick Marshall. I would agree with that. Probably not Jared Stidham. Probably not Jeremy Johnson. Definitely not Bo Nix. But yeah, Nick Marshall. Gus changed offenses with the hurry up and even had Nick Saban going, is this what we want? Is this what we want the sport to be? And he has Nick Saban making wholesale adjustments to the way that he operates on offense. And it kind of led to Lane Kiffin having his renaissance. And I think that Gus did great things for college football. And I'm really happy that he was a part of our sport. Like, even though I say all that stuff about Cam tongue in cheek, I do, however, want to replay his career a little bit. I do. I'm extremely tempted to dig into the sliding doors of what could have happened had he left Auburn for Arkansas after the 2017 season, which Auburn gets to the SEC championship. And there's all this like, oh, is he going to stay at Auburn? Is he going to take the Arkansas job after Brett Bielema was fired? And I really want to replay those sliding doors, if only because it would have saved us from the Chad Morris experience at Arkansas, which was just so bad. And to just wipe that off the board and wipe that from my memory would have been great, but we can't do that. I do think that Gus was probably always using that as a bit of leverage, even though he had like the ties to Arkansas. I fully understand that. And it would have meant a lot to him to be able to coach that program. I still don't think he was going to leave Auburn for that job. I wish that Gus had taken a year or two off after the 2020 season. After he got fired at Auburn and after he got paid that historic buyout of what was it, $21.5 million bucks, I wish instead of just taking 30 days and then accepting the UCF job, that he hit reset on his career. Because the way that all that played out, he essentially was in a spot in 2020 where I don't think it was a foregone conclusion that he was going to get fired. I don't think that was necessarily the case. Weird COVID year. Nobody knew going into that season if people are going to be spending money on buyouts because of all this money lost on ticket revenue. And there was this kind of uncertain situation in the SEC. And then you end up having 3 coaches get fired in the conference. And it was like, oh yeah, the money's still there. It's always there. But Gus ends up having this disastrous 2020 season in which his last ditch effort to save his offense was bringing in Chad Morris to be his offensive coordinator. And it didn't work. We know that it didn't work. So it looked initially after this, 30 days or whatever it was, that he was going to do what I said, is hit that reset button, kind of figure things out, maybe spend some time golfing, sit on that buyout money, travel the world, do what fired coaches do. And we instead have the Jeremy Pruitt thing happen at Tennessee, where Josh Heupel takes that job, and suddenly UCF is a really attractive vacancy for someone like Gus. But I just think that he needed a year away. He always looked like he was at the end of his rope at so many of those moments late at Auburn. And I'm not saying that I blame him for that. Only he can speak to the dynamics that were hovering over him and that continue to hover over whoever has that job. But I just kind of think he needed to get away from having the pressure of making those decisions, personnel, play calling, back and forth, the play calling thing constantly. I think he could have had a Mac Brown type reset where Mac Brown spent 5 years, I think it was, doing the ESPN thing, and then gets a second win to take the UNC job, go back home to UNC. And for a little bit there, Mac Brown was pretty fun. And you got a fun version of him. And, it didn't necessarily end the way that he or UNC had hoped. But, there was still a feeling of like, man, it's good to have Mac Brown in our sport. And I'm not saying, oh, college football is better with Mac Brown in it. But I enjoyed the second run of Mac Brown at UNC for what it was. Gave us Drake May, too. Let's not forget that. But I just think that Gus right now at 60 years old is not someone that should be just out and done. And I get why he's out and done, but someone who did this for 35 years, who innovated and did all the things that he did with offenses to modernize them, I just think he could have done more. I think he could have done this into his 70s. And I think that if he had just been in a better situation and taken a different sort of timeline, I think we're still talking about him having maybe a power conference head coaching job or like which job would make sense. Could he get back into the SEC? And instead, that's not going to happen. But look, you can't tell the story of 21st century college football without Gus Malzahn.
That was exactly where I started to say is, they talk about the Hall of Fame. Can you tell the story of this sport without including this person?
Yep.
And I mean, Gus Malzahn and Jeff Brom are like the highlights. And if you just roll the highlights, this is the greatest coach you've ever seen. These guys have contributed to half of the top, 15 or top 16 wins. There's no half of 15, but yeah, like top 16 wins. These right, 7.5. That would actually be perfect. Anyway, so yeah, I think that at the very top end, it was very good. And obviously, there's some big, challenges, the end at Auburn. And I think part of Gus Malzahn, this is partially, for me being a little bit more connected to the UCF community. I think an underrated part of his story, man, is his wife's health scare in 2022. I feel like when he got to UCF, he was like that. Like as far as Mac Brown, like he was locked in. They were building a pipeline. They were recruiting. Like they
big
really
marketing push. They were like, we're the future of college football. That was the big marketing push when he showed up.
People were buying, and it was it was working, and they had done the stuff with John Rice Plumlee. And then in early 2022, his wife goes from this like picture of health that she got some type of like viral infection, and all the quotes were that it just scared the mess out of him, and that he thought he was really close to losing her. And I would say this just makes him a great husband and reevaluating his priorities. I'm sure you could imagine something like that, or hopefully, you never have to with Lauren, where you go, hey, how much am I going to take my job seriously if I go from, worried about recruiting to worry about the person I love, the most in this world? And I think that really changed him. I think it put his perspective into a more rational perspective, which as a college football coach, I just don't think you can have a rational perspective. I think he started to get less obsessed with the recruiting stuff, or maybe it was almost the inverse, which is kind of interesting about him. It was like he was still very involved in recruiting, but the game day prep he started to step away from. And again, there's nothing wrong with that as a human being. It's really admirable. But I think that's a really big crossroads in Gus Malzahn's story, because I think that's what prevented him from the true second resurgence, which he was already starting to build at UCF.
It's a good point. It's a good point. And at that stage in life, that hits you differently than it does if you're 35, 36. It just does. You have more perspective. And there's probably a piece of Gus that's like, look, I got to win a national championship as a coordinator. I got to get there as a head coach. I've done a lot in this sport. Now is the time in my life where I don't feel like I necessarily have that same fire. And I think part of it, maybe, doing the Florida State thing for a year, was testing that and seeing, man, I'm going into a situation where they really need me and they need me to rebuild this thing. Let's see what I can give. And again, I bring up the numbers with Florida State. The numbers on offense were better than what the 5-7 record would indicate in the efficiency. And Tommy Castellanos, like some of the things that they did offensively were surprising for how bad they ended up being.
But they were not a bad offense this year. They were a cursed team because Mike Norvell was their head coach. But if you just statistically did like expected wins based on that offense, it was not the team you saw in front of you.
Yeah, but like let's also not pretend this was the turnaround that we saw at Auburn going from 2012 to 2013. All right, like it wasn't anything like that. And
For a
I
week, it
think there,
felt like it, didn't it?
yeah, it did. It did, Will. Man, it did. And then it so didn't for the rest of the year. But yeah, it's somebody that I think SEC fans had a lot of different opinions about for his time. But I think that's something you really can't take away is he just kind of changed the way that we view offenses, and his legacy will be one that is absolutely worth remembering. And I hope that Gus Malzahn finds peace. I really do. Will, everyone's freaking out over the non-conference scheduling that is highly debated right now. And I guess by talking about it here on this platform, I'll also be considered part of the crowd that's freaking out over non-conference scheduling and the merits of it. We've got Texas canceling the Arizona State series, which if you read what Chris Del Conte, I can't remember which outlet he said it to, but he's like, we were always going to cancel that series with Arizona State. And the timing of this is just coincidental. Whatever.
We
USC,
gotta
Notre
sell
Dame.
tickets, brother. He's like, that was always a ploy to get your money. Don't you worry.
Yeah, there was something in there with he apparently made a mistake with scheduling Louisiana versus Louisiana Monroe, and there was always a plan to backfill it in a different sort of way. I can't remember what exactly the story entailed, but Chris Del Conte had said we didn't necessarily expect this series to happen. And it wasn't supposed to happen until 2032, 2033 when they scheduled it back. And I think it was in 2019. So make of that what you will. We'll get to the Texas part of this in a second, but USC Notre Dame, we know that they can't get it figured out. And we might, maybe, it looks like it could happen, have Ohio State and Bama cancel their future home and home, which is the real thing that kind of has everyone up in arms. Feinbaum went on the fan in Columbus and cast some doubt on the Alabama side about that matchup happening. There's a lot going on there. And it's worth noting that Bama has the matchup with Oklahoma State in 2028. So with the SEC going to a 9-game conference schedule, that means in that 2028 season with the Ohio State matchup still on the board, Bama would face 11 power conference foes, which is wild. Once upon a time, there were only 11 regular season games, and teams would play like 8 power conference foes. So different story there. And then obviously with the expanded playoff, that's different than Texas, who now has no such matchups for 2032 and 2033. Those years, they'll happen eventually. The aliens won't get us all. But yeah, they still have a power conference matchup the next 4 seasons. So it's not like Texas was basically pulling the plug on all these games in the future, even though Texas was the team that complained about the Ohio State loss and said, if we just played UT Martin, we would have been in the playoff. They're not making that total 180, at least not yet. We'll see if that happens. It's the potential Bama Ohio State cancellation that has people debating, well, why should you play these good non-conference games? What's the point of them anymore? I hate it. I hate it, Will. I hate this debate. In no other sport can you customize your schedule and then complain about when the results don't work in your favor. And you could say, well, in no other sport do you have a subjective committee deciding your fate. I get that as well. Okay. I get that too. But
At college basketball, you kind of do.
true. A lot of metrics that go into that, but true. Very, very true. For those saying that you need to just schedule an easy non-conference slate because look at what the last 3 national champs did by not having non-conference power conference foes. That's a mouthful. I don't like saying conference that much. Look at Miami. Miami only made the playoff because it beat Notre Dame. All right. 10-2 does not guarantee you a playoff spot. Okay. For all these people saying that's the case, that is not the case. It is not just simply get to 10-2 and then just hope that everything will be fine and the selection committee won't look at your non-conference schedule. That is so untrue. And it is especially untrue if you consider that teams like Vandy went 10-2 and didn't have a non-conference game that the selection committee valued because Virginia Tech just fell apart and they kind of got screwed by it. And so I just can't stand that people pretend that there's no upside to quality non-conference matchups and that can only hurt their team because you need data points. And look, the first 9-3 team to make the college football playoff, whether that's the 12 team, the 14 team, the 16 team, wherever the heck we're going to be doing by the end of the decade, it will be and again, we're just talking about at large. We're not talking about conference champs or automatic qualifiers in that way. The first 9-3 at large team to make the playoff, I guarantee you, I bet you 100% they will have a marquee non-conference win that the selection committee will go, that makes your 9-3 different. It will have aged like Sandra Bullock. It will look phenomenal. And you'll go, looking back on that, you guys really did do a lot in non-conference play. And we really appreciated that. And you're going to get in over this 10-2 team. That stuff happens. And Ari Wasserman brought up this really good point. Like, Will, you remember the BCS era when one loss could be done, right? One loss, no chance to play for a national championship. You're done. Teams still scheduled the non-conference play. Maybe not at the rate that they do now, but they were still willing to put those matchups on the schedule because, hey, it's better for the sport, and you need those data points to be able to get into the national championship.
Yeah, I mean, that's part of it that was always a little bit frustrating to me is that people would we got gaslit into talking about strength of schedule for these old SEC teams where Saban would definitely schedule guys at a conference like that. There's the famous FSU matchup where obviously the quarterback got hurt, but they were, and again, to this day, there's the Wisconsin matchups that are on their schedule that are from the Saban era.
Bama tweaked the non-conference scheduling. Bama initially had the home and home with Penn State, and then said, we're going to neutral site. We think that there's a lot of financial incentive, and they canceled the Michigan State series. And I think they might have canceled one other that I'm blanking on, but they moved all theirs to the neutral site games. And so they still had the marquee matchups, albeit with a different context.
And what's so kind of funny about this, right? Is I've been pretty much against the expanded conference schedule throughout. I just feel like that's the SEC getting bullied by the Big Ten in a way that has never worked for them. And so I say that to say it's always the two, conflicting beliefs. We think the SEC is the best conference in the world. So we're going to limit ourselves by playing more conference games against harder competition. And then simultaneously, the SEC is so hard to play in that we're now kind of scared to play out of conference foes. What that lines up to be in that reality is you want to get together and complain. It's ambiguity is what it is. It's fewer data points so that Greg Sankey can now come out and say, oh, well, this SEC team that has very few non-conference opportunities is against this SEC team that has very few and just take our word for it. They're great. And that's never what the SEC has been about. There is not a thing that I've seen that has made me question the SEC's kind of control and dominance of the sport in the way that getting bullied into the expanded conference schedule and then backing away from out of conference where you go, look how helpful some of these games were, in the early season, to our outlook on these teams. Now, some of them imploded down the stretch, like a Mississippi State or a Tennessee, but having those wins early on, I mean, they had their whole life in front of them. And think about how much worse those teams' seasons would have been. I mean, Mississippi State probably is looking at a new head coach if they don't beat Arizona State last year, right? And so that being said, because that was the first bit of hopium that they had under Jeff Lebby. And so I think that the expanded conference schedule is going to create the 9-3 team that you just talked about, but it's a self-fulfilling prophecy because now everyone is making the exact same points. We have the strongest conference. Look at these ridiculous matchups we just made up. No, we have the strongest conference. And the way to tell is play the games against each other. But we don't want to do that. We don't want a super conference. We just want to complain. So you got it. Congrats.
Ohio State got a bye because it beat Texas. Ohio State lost in the Big Ten Championship to Indiana. If they had lost that game, they would not have gotten a bye. They got into the playoff and then lost to Miami. They got maybe a round further than they would have. It benefits you. It really does. And you could maybe say, hey, there's a world in which if you just look through this one window, it would hurt you. But it just takes it yes, there's risk in sports. In what world is there supposed to be no risk whatsoever? And people are going to say, oh, well, what about the conference championship? What about the college football playoff? Hey, you have to be able to punch the teams that lose in the conference championship. Is everybody playing in the conference championship? Did everybody earn that right to be able to do that? No, that's why risk is talked about in a different sort of way with non-conference play, something that everybody does versus getting an extra game and getting to a conference championship. So yeah, it's a maddening argument.
Really quick, man, the teams that we have talked about is historically soft, okay? Michigan, Notre Dame, Miami, Ohio State. Oh, they don't play anybody up there at Ohio State. They're the ones chomping at the bit to go schedule these games. You look at the big Oklahoma game last year. Oh my God, the Oklahoma-Michigan game. How fun was that,
Georgia's
right?
future non-conference schedule is loaded. It's loaded.
Yeah. And that's another good one too, where like they've kind of stuck with it, right? And so I say that to say, like the narrative is actually, and you know me, I'm a narrative breaker. I hate like the lazy take. But if you're sitting here pointing at this other conference, going, they're soft, they don't play anybody, they're the ones ready to go. You know, it's USC, I believe, that's getting out of that series. Notre Dame has an entire open schedule. Like, it's hard for me to believe that they're the ones doing that. So that being said, yeah, it's like let's just look at reality here because I will not be entertaining the whining when you're playing East West whatever state later on. You know.
If Clemson had just played Louisiana Monroe instead of LSU, like they're an 8-4 team, you know? They're 8-4. They're maybe no, they're not getting that far. Never mind. I'm not going to say that bowl game, but you know, it changes things, you know. All right. The college football calendar, not to complain too much here, but the college football calendar is getting worse. Everybody knows it. 39 days. 39 days from to decide a national champion. That is a 39-day playoff that we're going to have next year. And it's insane. And it's all because they want to avoid the NFL overlap. They don't want to have the same windows. This is all about money. If you're trying to figure out why would they do this, it's always about money. The season needs to start earlier. That's the solution. Give us the OTA schedule of summer where you're on campus and then start this in mid-August. Yes, it's going to be hot. I get it. Okay. But then you can end in early January. I would rather take guys being hot, which by the way, it's going to be hot in the Southeastern Conference through the month of October because that's the way that this works. And you'll adjust. I promise you would adjust. If being hot is the complaint, that's not a good enough reason to hold back on that. A national championship on January 25th is just, that's not it. That's not it. Who is signing up for this? Who wants this? Like you could tell me, oh, it's great that the season lasts so long. You know, it doesn't end as quick. And if you're a college football fan, you should want it to last forever. No. I want this decided in a way that actually makes sense. I want the timeline of this season to unfold. Yes, more football is really good, but I want this to unfold in a way that doesn't feel like it's dragging. Okay. You can have a favorite movie. It doesn't mean you want your favorite movie to be 4 hours. It's probably your favorite movie for a reason. Okay. I don't necessarily need these unbelievable rom-coms to be 2.5 hours just because Judd Apatow insists them to be like 2.5 hours. All right. I kind of wish he would kind of keep them to more like an hour 40. Instead, he's got to always, add in the extra time. We don't always need that extra time. We just don't. I think that when you saw the initial plan for the schedule next year, the biggest complaint was probably the fact that there's the 2-week break between the quarterfinals and the semifinals. Semifinals on January 14th and 15th, Will. What? What? Like in 2013, speaking of Gus Malzahn, the final year of the BCS era, the title game was on January 6th. All right, we don't need to get down January 6th road. Just national championship game. Sticking to sports here. At the start of the 21st century, this game was played on January 3rd. The national championship was on January 3rd. Next season, it will be more than 3 weeks later than that. It feels late. We in the moment, even getting excited for a national championship game, we're like, this feels way too late. Why is this happening like this? And yet it's still going to keep happening because money and TV, and that's all that really matters.
Yeah, I mean, having been in some of these meeting rooms, right, I can just tell you almost exactly how these conversations go with the TV folks, where it's just like, oh, we just got to maximize revenue generation opportunities, and part of that I'm realizing is that horrendous Big Ten deal that got signed. This is how you get that money back is you keep, another week, another sponsorship opportunity, you space out the bowl games, you do all that.
You play football on Friday night, even though there's like 6 people watching in a bar somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah. And like that's kind of my thing is it's like, anybody who is saying they're doing this for the good of the sport or like, bleep the college athletes that have like the days of we got to go to class and care about like
we got to have the semester finished.
Yeah, like right? These kids are going to be graduated, but they're going to walk across the stage and be like, can I even go back? Is my key card work to get in the facility? And so, yeah, it's dumb, man. I mean, again, to your point, we could move the calendar up and start it sooner, which would probably be a little bit, hey, are you soft or are you not? Is it an advantage of the SEC to be training in the hot weather? Not for certain SEC head coaches. But that being said, like, I think that at the end of the day, like, we can't be, look at baseball, man. You got the whole Northeast is frozen and we're starting baseball season. Northern teams just have to figure it out. Like, I don't know.
Dude, my
I
brother
think
played at Valpo, and they would do a southern road trip. They would just do
yeah,
a southern road trip, and they play at, Arkansas, and they play, in Florida. They'd go out to Vegas. They went to Hawaii one year. Just you'll figure it out. If being
yes.
hot is the biggest concern, okay, maybe we don't have that 3:30 kickoff in the swamp like we did. What was it, 2 years ago, start of 2024,
Mhm.
or you'll just be hot and you'll lose a bunch of weight. And you'll feel better about yourself at the end of. No, I'm kidding. I don't mean that.
I
But
mean, but it's it's
we'll figure
it's
it
like
out.
we're not, scheduling like you talked about. We're not scheduled home and home. So like, oh, a lot of these matchups are at domes. They're at Cowboy Stadium. They're at the Superdome. They're air conditioned, right? And then you have these indoor practice facilities where you contrast with baseball. Like, kid, this growing up in Chicago. Like when LSU played in Milwaukee, there was snow on the ground for like months, and then they just had to go to Baton Rouge and just see LSU. And it's like that's just how other sports work sometimes. So if we're going to keep this nonsense up about just floating out crazy and bigger playoffs, we have to move the front end. We can't keep pushing it back because, like the NFL, stop being scared of the NFL. Like you want to be the NFL, but you don't want to compete with the NFL. Just like it's. Just, I feel like I'm in crazy town.
And if you don't want to compete with the NFL, great. You get
Move
those
this.
2 weeks on the front end.
Yeah,
And
easy
then
answer.
you get to capitalize before the NFL gets into playoff mode by having your season end in early January, the first week of January, like it should. It's maddening. All right, let's end on a positive note. What if Fernando Mendoza's call had gone through to Kirby Smart? So, not sure if you saw this. Mendoza told the ticket in Dallas, I believe it was, that he thought he was ready to commit to Kirby Smart when he entered the portal in December of 2024. So he calls him. And I remember Georgia was recruiting him at the time, and that was a possible destination for him. But the call didn't go through. So as the story goes, he sleeps on it, he prays on it, decides that IU is the path. Worth noting that happened in December of 2024 before Gunnar Stockton started in the Sugar Bowl loss to Notre Dame. So he basically had like the second half of the SEC championship in which he was able to lead the comeback. But, you're still kind of figuring out your options if you're Georgia. And important to kind of understand in relation to pursuing a guy in the portal, all that stuff. The sliding doors is what happens to Georgia if Mendoza is the guy. Does Georgia win a national championship if Fernando Mendoza is their quarterback? What are your initial thoughts on that?
This is one where I will, hearken to the email and say, Georgia fans, please email us on this. Because I would say not insignificant portion of Georgia fans would tell you they'd rather have Gunner Stockton because they get him for another year. I've heard this before with different quarterbacks that they almost got. I think they've been through this song and dance before. So, I mean, Gunner Stockton's obviously a great player, but Fernando Mendoza was the best player in the country last year. It's hard to anticipate. Are things different for Georgia? Does he have that same, situation? What we do know is I don't think Gunnar Stockton's the thing that went wrong with Georgia last year, I wouldn't
I
say.
agree.
And I think things went very right for Fernando Mendoza at Indiana. So I think both sides would probably tell you, we'd probably take our reality we're living in right now.
It's fascinating to think about. I think you're right. Let's not forget, Gunnar Stockton finished seventh in the Heisman voting. He was incredibly clutch. He was not necessarily the problem in that Ole Miss game. He did have the stretch where he was definitely concussed, and he probably had a lull in that game. Fernando Mendoza had lulls. Okay, he had lulls. He was not a perfect player, even though he did win a Heisman Trophy and go 16-0. Just in case you forgot that. But I
Sick
can't say
brag.
with certain. Yeah, I never get those sick brags. I can't say with certainty that all of a sudden makes Georgia the national champs, okay? Because it's just there are other places in which they probably could have had more significant upgrades. Again, a guy that was really good as a quarterback for you in Gunnar Stockton. You're talking about replacing him. Mike Bobo was a Broyles Award finalist, the only offensive coach who was a Broyles Award finalist. I need to repeat that. I'm defending Mike Bobo at this point. But like, I don't know. Both are great locker room guys. Both, I think, very clearly have the support of their head coach and all that stuff. I think they check very similar boxes in that way. I think Mendoza makes Georgia better, but I thought he made strides in his game because of Signetti and Shanahan, and working with those two guys at IU really benefited him. And I don't know that he necessarily would have excelled in the same sort of way that Gunnar did, given the experience that he already had with Bobo, given the familiarity that he had with some of those receivers, that coaching staff, all that stuff. So it's fascinating to think about. But I think Georgia's issue, like you mentioned, it was in other places. It was a defense that was still really young and was inconsistent. I thought it showed at times. just like a young pup, young bulldog, you bring in the house, and sometimes pees on the carpet a few times before it figures out, nope, need to go outside when it's time. Yeah, I think Georgia had some of those moments last year. I still think probably even if Fernando Mendoza plays that game in the Sugar Bowl, Trinidad Chambliss has the last laugh. He was just on one. So
That's the thing.
I don't know.
Unless Mendoza could tackle Trinidad Chambliss on that one play where he was just like doing Michael Vick
Yeah,
stuff, then like it's really not much you
the
can
one
do
play,
there.
like the 3 plays in that game. I mean, goodness gracious, yeah. I think the more obvious answer is that IU does not win a national championship. That's probably more of the impact, and somebody else does. Maybe Miami would have been the team to win a national championship because they would have had. I was trying to go back and find like the quarterbacks that would have been interesting for IU, like a Miller Moss, a Connor Wigman, dare I say. Um, if you go to IU, you don't spell your name Conner, but nonetheless, I would have probably welcomed that with open arms. Who are we kidding? So yeah, just something interesting to think about, and that's a comment that made the rounds this past week. All right, well, lad of the week. We've been sitting on this for a little bit. I'm gonna go pretty recent though. Um, we just got to go with Team USA game-winning goals against Canada, right? Jack Hughes, Megan Keller, duh. I mean, Olympic heroes. I don't know how many drinks they've consumed since their game winners. They will never pay for another drink ever again in the United States. That to me is just unbelievable all-time moments that we saw. The Jack Hughes goal, sitting here watching, a household that admittedly hockey is not the first thing that we turn on TV, but mother-in-law in town, Claire doing a million things, wants to watch The Little Mermaid. No, honey. Team USA is competing for its first goal, for its first gold medal in men's hockey since 1980. I watched the Miracle on Ice documentary on Netflix. That is so unbelievably good. I would encourage everybody to go back and watch it. I watched it before the Olympics, and it got me fired up. Chills, man. Like absolute chills. Jack Hughes. And then Orlando gets a shout out immediately after the Jack Hughes goal because his dad was the coach of the Solar Bears. So like, he was born in Orlando, very smartly moved away from here. Not exactly hockey mecca, but yeah, Jack Hughes, Megan Keller. Hope they're having a time, man. Hope they're having an absolute time.
Yeah, I was I was in Orlando for the week at this builder conference. I booked an Airbnb to stay through the weekend. And my buddies were like texting in a group. The thing about my buddies, like they don't really joke about plans. Like they'll just straight up tell you no. And so like all of my buddies were like, dude, we're doing a Zoom call at 8 a.m. for the gold medal game for men's hockey. You're the only like me. I'm gonna be the one who's not there. And I was like,
Yep.
are you serious? Like all you guys are gonna be there? And I don't know if I told you about this part of it, Connor. My boy John was like on a plane and he was like on his iPad. And it was the strongest airplane I've ever seen in my life. Like he was locked in. It was complete eye contact on a plane. My boy Peyton, who's in Bend, Oregon, that game was at like 5 a.m. up there. He just didn't sleep the night before. I was like looking at him, I was like, it's dark there. Like there's no sunlight. And so I was like, all I got to do is, shake off, the night before or whatever, get a little bit extra sleep. And so my other boys had gone to the casino the night before. So he's like, I was like, look, I got the easiest path here to make this happen. So yeah, it was a super fun experience that I'll cherish forever. And that's why people, lace it up for Team USA is to bring, a Cajun that has never had any hockey experience go in here and just screaming, go America, especially at this very, divisive time in our history. So I think it was just an awesome experience. Top 10 or so sports watching times in my life. It was great.
Yeah, absolutely. Up there. The Jack Hughes teeth. I I don't know how they're gonna make that realistic when this inevitably gets made into a movie with Chalamet starring as Jack Hughes. That just makes too much sense. But the teeth element, whoever has to figure that out with makeup on the movie set. Good luck, because recreating that is going to be darn near impossible, man. It was, gosh, just absolutely perfect, and one of those moments that you feel like everybody in the world is watching this, and it's so surreal. Like we all have our own teams and stuff like that we root for, and man, to be able to see that play out in the fashion that it did, with how much it felt like Canada just dominated the second and third period of that game, and having have overtime winners in both the way that they did, man. It was something I will not soon forget. All right, who you got lad of the week?
This is definitely going to take a turn here, so I'm glad we started with the happy one. Rondell Moore, man, this
Yeah,
one really hit me. We talked about some of the Jeff Brown stuff. We talked about these big games, and a guy that we've kind of followed for our time covering college football. He's been a part of some of these really big moments, his college time, and a guy that in the NFL has had some really big moments as well. Really just heartbreaking. He's found he passed away at his home on Sunday. So I know like things are always developing with stuff like that, but it feels like it was kind of like a mental health situation. So I just want to say,
report
no
was
matter.
self-inflicted gunshot wound. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so, that's always really tough to hear. And you can kind of see, we all do the thing where we hear a guy, hear what happens to a guy, we think, oh, were there any signs and everything? And it felt like this was a pretty normal dude from the guys that had seen him, and that just goes to show like you never know what the people around you are going through. I've said this before on here. But just want to just honor him and the fact that he had brought us so many smiles and kind of just rest in power in that way, right? Where it's like I'm sure, if he reached out to people around him, we always talk about nothing is too big to overcome with your circle, whoever they may be, or start a new circle. I've had to do that before, and it's not as daunting as it seems. So it's just a guy that, like I said, had brought me so much joy as a player. It's just sad to see it in the way it did. So yeah, it's just something that should never happen.
I had talked to Wandale Robinson about him before, and those guys, both Louisville guys, who like they worked out together. Their games were kind of really similar in the way that they operate. Wandale Robinson wasn't a Louisville guy through and through, I don't think, but he and Rondale had known each other for a really long time, and was just always like, man, he's a real one. Like, go back and watch the 2018 Purdue Ohio State game, man. Like, the plays that he made, it's one of the best receiver performances of the playoff era, bar none. I mean, just absolutely took over the game. And I, when you see that news break, you're like, what? Like that guy? Dang. And you're right. You just never know what somebody has going on. Just a terrible, terrible tragedy, and so sad to see that play out the way that it did. Also wanted to mention as well, many people who are listening to this who have covered and who have consumed Tennessee coverage. I'm sure you've read Wes Rucker, the tragedy that ultimately took his life. Just can't even begin to think about what his family is going through. I did not have a relationship with Wes. I don't want to pretend that I did. I had probably a 15-20 minute conversation when he was covering the NCAA tournament here in Orlando. And I remember talking to him like late on a Thursday night at one point. That was my only interaction. And just, dude couldn't have been nicer. I won't pretend that I knew him or anything like that. But I bring this up because if you have the means to donate to the GoFundMe for his family that's been started, I know a lot of people have tweeted out. Matt Jones with Kentucky Sports Radio tweeted out. A lot of people at On3. Just search it, Wes Rucker, GoFundMe. If you have the means to donate and help that family out, please do. Please keep them in your thoughts. I cannot begin to fathom what that family and what that community is going through, because I know Wes meant a lot to a lot of people. And it was just such a shame to see a life end so soon. So hope everybody is able to pay their respects to him. Will, one housekeeping note. Actually, I got like 2 or 3 housekeeping notes to end on here. We are bringing back, it might mean too much, stories of SEC fandom that maybe go a little bit too far. Okay. The one that I love to bring up, my guy Lawrence Butts, who was a huge Bama fan. He was serviced in Iraq. And to kick off the 2017 season, a game that we talked about earlier, Florida State, Bama, greatest opener in the history of college football per Gary Stokan. He watched that game in Saddam Hussein's house, which was vacant. Saddam was not in there. Need to always have that. Need to make
That's
sure
one
that's
where like
known.
that story is in my mind and it feels made up, So you're like, how is Saddam Hussein? Yep.
Yep. But always love bringing that up. That's the type of stuff that we're looking for. So please, if you have stories like that,
If you've
email
watched a
us.
college football game at Saddam Hussein, let us know. There can't be
Yeah.
two, surely.
Yeah. Look, everybody has probably had like a punch a TV story or something like that, but stories in which you've even kind of had to check yourself and gone, am I maybe taking this over the top? So it might mean too much. Please email those stories to the ogkickoff@gmail.com. Also, this is huge. This is huge. We've talked about this. Need to remind the people again. We have another pod later in the week. I've already done all the prep. Can't wait for it. It just meant more. We got a new intro song for that as well. How about it? We are doing 2021 Ole Miss at Tennessee. It is the mustard vape pen Lane Kiffin game. Lane wasn't doing the vape pen, the golf ball game, stuff thrown at him. You know what I'm saying? We're doing that game. It is going to be a lot of fun. Our good buddy Tom Hart is going to join us as well. We got him confirmed for that. Tom was on the call that night. Had a lot of thoughts about that game. And I've talked to him about that since, but he will have a lot more thoughts on that as well. So, Will, this is going to be your first It Just Meant More game. I'm excited for you. I want to re-experience what it was like the very first time that I got to do this.
It's so beautiful, right? Like, it's just such a perfect game because it's one of the rare ones where Tennessee fans and Ole Miss fans are probably united now upon retelling this. And who's the
True.
beneficiary? LSU, of course, who was nowhere to be found on that day. So yeah, it's incredible to see. I mean, one of the more, I guess, relatable moments for Lane Kiffin, like I'll never forget the interview. He was like, I guess they don't like me. So it's pretty great.
Perfect with Cole pregame, just absolutely iconic. And so, yeah, we will be recapping that game, that very, very famous game. And with the context of Lane being at LSU, it's going to make it that much better. So that is the plan for later in the week. That is going to drop on Friday morning. And that will be our new schedule through the NFL draft. That's going to be the plan. Early in the week, we're going to kind of recap what's going on, or we'll have some sort of evergreen stuff that we'll talk about. And then that will be for Tuesday. And then Friday mornings, you're going to be able to get in your car, hopefully drive to work, not drive to work, exercise, whatever, and listen to it. And It Just Meant More. Please, I try not to ask this, but I think at a point like this, wherein this is the first episode of the OG Kickoff, please subscribe wherever you can subscribe to our content, whether that's on YouTube, the OG Kickoff, on Instagram, the OG Kickoff. You can join the Facebook group, the OG Kickoff. All these places. Email us.
You can show up at Connor's house. He told me that. Just don't unannounced knock.
Just if you do, that's fine.
5-star
do whatever. Do whatever. 5-star review, and don't make the first thing that you say, and you're a ginger. Don't do that. Okay. I don't need that.
The gall that some of these older folks have, man.
Look, gingers, it takes all kinds of kinds. Shout out Miranda Lambert. Just saying. Not the first thing to say to me. Just not. Leave us a 5-star review. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can watch all of our episodes of the OG Kickoff. Follow us on Twitter, @CJ O'Gara, @GoSoHard. Thanks, guys. Talk soon. Real soon.